Number 1. Dream. I can't really explain this, but it happened to me very recently. I've lived alone in a house for a few years. It is not in the best neighborhood, but it is not a bad neighborhood either. It is the kind of place where you don't expect any houses to be broken into or anything like that, but you always make sure that you keep your doors and windows locked anyway. So this happened after a really long day at work. Normally I get home, and I wind down and I watch some TV or mess around online for a little bit. That way I can just go to bed without a million thoughts just rolling around in my head. But on that day, there was no way I could even keep my eyes open. So I turned out all the lights, locked up, and then I went to bed. I don't have bad dreams very often. I can't even explain to you why this dream was even a bad dream. There was nothing specifically bad happening in the dream. I was in my house by myself, and then suddenly, I was just gripped with this unexplainable terror. That is all that it was. Fear. I remember running around in the different rooms of the small house that I lived in, trying to get away from whatever it was that was scaring me. I finally ended up in my bed, in the dream, cowering from whatever it was that was scaring me. That is when I woke up. As usual with scary dreams, I get a little scared once I wake up, and then the fear quickly goes away. This was no different. For a few moments I just lay there, wondering if I wanted to go back to sleep or not. I eventually decided maybe I needed to make myself some tea, and then try sleeping after that. I always walked around in my house in the dark. I exited my bedroom and into the living room, which I had to go through to get to the kitchen. Before I was able to get to the kitchen, though, I heard some scratching noises coming from my front door. My first thought was maybe that one of the neighborhood kitties was scratching on the door. But still, instinctively, I turned to face the front door. I had a window in my front door, and I wasn't sure what I was seeing at first. There was something moving in the window, but until it rose up a bit and looked at me through the window, I didn't realize that it was a man wearing a mask. It quickly hit me that he was trying to break into my house. Then it all came flooding back. All the fear that I felt in the dream came rushing back into me. Much like me in the dream, I turned and went back into my bedroom, shut the door, and went to cower on my bed. My phone was on my nightstand, and I used it to call 911 quickly. By the time the police had showed up, the guy had left. They figured he knew that the police were being called and fled. There had been a couple burglaries in the neighborhood, which was news to me. They figured it was the same man who had committed them all. I just thought back to the strange, scary dream that I had. If it hadn't been so terrifying and woke me up, the man may have gotten in. But how could it have predicted what was going to happen? Number 2. Graveyard shift. I worked the graveyard shift at a convenience store in London. We never got a whole lot of people to come in there late at night. Mostly there would be people who had been up late drinking at one of the pubs, or several of the pubs, and buying some cigarettes or unhealthy snacks. So my nights were normally pretty boring. I did occasionally get some creepy people coming in there, but there was never anyone dangerous. On this weekend night, I was watching a show on my phone behind the counter. It might have been around 3 when I heard the door open. A strange and disheveled-looking man came into the store. He looked like he could have been either drunk or high. He wobbled quite a bit when he walked, but it was nothing unusual for me to see that time of night. However, I did watch him as he walked to the back of the store and he went into the bathroom. Obviously, he was just some guy who'd gotten really drunk and had to take a piss. My boss always wanted only customers to use the bathroom, But I didn't care. It was much better to just let them use it than to have them going out in the street. I kept watching the show, but also kept looking down the aisle at the door, waiting for him to emerge. He was in there for quite a while, for someone who just had to piss, so I began thinking he might have done something more. I hoped he wasn't doing drugs in there, or that he fell asleep either. I just didn't want to deal with that on that particular night. But I began to get more nervous the longer I waited, and he still hadn't come out of the bathroom. I began to really believe he was shooting up or something, and that just made me extremely uncomfortable. After so much time had passed, and no one else had come into the store, and he still hadn't come out of the bathroom, I thought I would go and knock on the door. Carefully, I went and tapped on the door a few times. I got no answer. I tapped again and asked if he was doing all right in the bathroom. Still, I got no answer. That was when I thought I would have to go ahead and open the door. I tried, and it was of course locked from the inside. Frustrated, I had to go to the counter and get the key to the bathroom. By this point, I was more annoyed than nervous. I put my hand on the doorknob before putting the key in it. I was surprised when I felt the knob was loose and was able to turn. I actually jumped back, thinking that the man was finally coming out of the bathroom on his own. But he didn't. Still, nothing happened. So finally, I decided I had to open the door and get the guy out of there. When I opened the door, there was no one in the bathroom at all. The shock of seeing no one in there almost knocked me over. I had clearly watched the man come in, stumbling slowly into the bathroom. I had not seen him leave, because he would have had to go past me in order to do this. There was no window in the bathroom, nor was there any other way to get out of the store other than the front door. I closed the door and went back to the counter. I had no way to explain what had happened, and I didn't want to tell anyone about it. I spent the rest of the evening just confused and scared. I don't believe in ghosts, but I can't explain anything that happened. I found a new job shortly later. Number 3. Matt. Back in the early 2000s, before smartphones and apps existed, I used to try to make friends, or more, by using certain dating websites. Most of the time they just ended up in disappointment, but every now and then I made a friend that would last for a while, or even someone to date for a few months. I met Matt, who was a few years younger than I was. Not a whole lot, but too much for me to consider being in a relationship with him. I wish, looking back, that I hadn't ruled that out, because he was actually the best person I had ever met from any of those sites. Matt and I fell into a routine of going out to eat a few times a week and having movie nights as well. He was 19 and lived at home with his parents, so I never knew exactly where he lived. I did know where he worked, though. He taught ceramic classes at a privately owned studio, working for a woman whose name I can't remember. I had actually been in the studio more than once. So there was one night, after we had known each other for a while, that Matt called me up and asked if I could come pick him up from work. His car wasn't starting, and it was one of those days that we were going out to eat. I had no problem with this, of course. We generally met up that way, and took one car anyhow. The studio was an old building that sat alone in a big parking lot. I guess previously there had been other buildings in the area, but they had been demolished. The lady who owned the studio also owned the property. It was in the fall, and it was already dark outside, although it was not very late yet. As I drove into the parking lot, the studio was still a distance away from me. It was unusually dark, however. Not only that, I didn't see Matt's car, or anyone's car, parked anywhere around the place. He had a large white car that was always parked in the exact spot every time that I'd been there. When I pulled up to the building, I noticed something else that was really strange. The sign on the building had been removed. When I got out of the car and walked up to the door, there were chains on the door. There was also some sort of paper or something put all over the inside of the windows, so I couldn't see inside the building. Not having any idea what had happened, I tried calling Matt, but when I did, I was surprised to find that the call wouldn't go through. It wouldn't even send me to his voicemail that would leave me a message. I decided to drive to the restaurant that we were going to and see if he had just left without me. But when I got there, I couldn't find his car in the parking lot. I went in, and they allowed me to look around, but he was not there either. I was really concerned, but not sure what else I could do. I didn't know where he lived, so I couldn't go and talk to his parents. All I could do to think was go home and send him an email and ask what happened. Well, when I sent the email, it was returned to me. Frustrated, I went onto the dating site to find his profile and contact him that way, but no matter what, I couldn't find the profile. I checked back on the phone to verify that I had gotten the call from Matt and that I wasn't just going crazy. It was on there, but I just couldn't call back. I never saw Matt again, or heard anything about him. I have often wondered if I had a psychotic break or something like that. Maybe Matt only existed in my head. But I had calls from him on my phone, so I don't know what happened. Number 4. From the club. Now I know what people are going to think when they get to the end of the story, so when we get there I will bring it up again. However, nothing like this had ever happened before, and has ever happened since. There was a club that was not very far from my apartment where I lived in my early 20s, so I would often be there on the weekend, having drinks and trying to meet people. I was not looking for any sort of commitment at the time, so I didn't mind meeting up with women at the club. It really was the best place at the time to meet people who weren't looking for a commitment. On this night, I had a bit to drink. This is what I was referring to earlier. When I tell others this story, they suggest that I just got super drunk and hallucinated it all. However, I've always been able to handle my alcohol fairly well, and I have definitely been drunker than this before. At no point during the night did I black out or lose memories. I met this really sexy woman, and we got to talking through the night. We also did some dancing and drank a lot, and did a little bit of chatting too. So, after all of that, she was actually the one that suggested that we go back to my apartment. I think I would have been an idiot if I had refused, so we went back and had a wonderful night together. I still have very vivid memories of this many years later. Eventually we fell asleep. When I woke up late the following morning, I found that she had left during the night. Not a big deal, as I've had this happen before. I noticed when I walked by the front room of the apartment, my jacket was on the floor by the front door. I went to pick it up when I noticed something very odd. The chain on my door was chained. If anyone has one of those chain locks on their door, you of course know they can only be locked from the inside. My first thought was the woman hadn't left. Perhaps she was in the kitchen or maybe in the bathroom. However, after looking around in those places and the entire rest of the apartment, I was unable to find her anywhere. I was absolutely baffled. The first thing you might think then is that she left through one of the windows. It would be a really weird thing to do when she could just walk out the front door. But it would make more sense than the woman just disappearing, right? Wrong. My apartment was on the 19th floor of a high-rise building. I did have a balcony, but no one was making it out of my apartment without going out the front door of that apartment. That is, unless she was Spider-Woman. So, you might think that I have hallucinated it, but I know that I didn't. We had drinks when we got home, and her glass was on the nightstand on the side of the bed that she slept on. So, unless she also brought in a lot of equipment to propel down the building, I cannot tell you how that lady got out of my place. Number 5. Missing class. In my senior year of college, I took a humanities class. I lived off campus, and I still rarely ever missed school. I was a really good planner. I kept my syllabus for every class, despite putting all the dates and information into my school planner. So, if I missed something, or if something changed, then I would have a record that I had the correct information. Toward the end of the semester, though, I came down with a bit of an illness. I only missed 1 week of class, but it was the week right before the final exams. In the humanities class, the final exam was a presentation before the class. I had mine done long before the end of the semester, so felt that I had nothing to worry about. However, on the day of the class, I went to the classroom and no one was there. I waited around a while, but no one showed up, neither any of the students nor the professor. I checked on my syllabus to make sure that I hadn't gotten the date wrong. It was the date that I had put in my planner, the time and place checked. I waited for quite a while, with no idea what was going on. I went by the professor's office, but he wasn't there either. All I could think to do was go to the library and send an email to the professor, so I went and did that. Then I just remained in the library, working on some other things I needed to do for a few hours. After a couple hours, I got an email back from the professor. He was confused by the email that I had sent him. I asked him if he had changed the date or place of the class. He told me no, and they had just completed the class, and I had never shown up. We emailed back and forth, and I let him know what I had experienced. It was hard to tell if he believed me, but he did seem as confused as I was. Once we had talked it through, though, I was 100% confident that I had been there at the right time and place, but there was no one in that class or the room. Fortunately, he knew that I was a good student, and he accepted my notes in place of the presentation and my PowerPoint as my final project, and gave me an A anyway. Every now and then, I still email him, and he always mentions this weird experience. Hey all, Killer Orange Cat here. First, as usual, I want to thank all my paid patrons, including my 2 VIPs, Chiamerah Cat and Pixie Hopper 8. I also want to thank Heidi H, Chronic J, Stinky Ooze, EricaOdd, Tracy Sellars, Kelli Clark, and Broken Angel. Just to let patrons know, I am working on 2 short stories that will only be available on Patreon. They are things that have happened to me personally. Those will be up hopefully tomorrow night, so please check back on Patreon tomorrow night to see if those are up there. They're going to be 2 videos. One will be just for paid patrons, and one of the others will be a video that I'll let everyone listen to. I hope that you all come and listen to them both if you can, or one if you can, and just enjoy them. And now I want to mention all of my free Patreon members, starting with Anthony Bowers, Remi, Venikins, Rose Metro, Woofer McWooferson, Cindy Cleveland, Vanapira Rayne, William H., Alien Unicorn 13, Kathryn Lynch, The Bama Guy 334, Michael Vasquez, Bonnie Lynn, Collet Bond, Krista Pike, Prince UVA, HF Creations, Bonnie Gibbs, Linda Moore, DJ Lira, Evil Black Cat, Lori Hicks, Lisa Herman, and Krystal Robin. But most importantly, don't forget to make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where a Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.